to not bend and things still remain the same. And I don't wanna pay. Comes down to a fight between you and me, then you are doomed to lose.
The red flag flying here.
Because you'll see we've started with a different tune today. I'm desperately trying to find out which number of show it is, Paul. Can you remind me?
73.
73. Well, and to those of you who are listening in, thank you for returning. Welcome. It's great to see you. And the dream team is here. Paul Daly, the boss and techno genius, Sam Townsend, the senior Durham County Council politician, Laura Daly, that firebrand of feminism and wonderfulness, and finally Stuart, that fountain well of wisdom. You are so privileged, and I'm so privileged to be here with them. We've got some great questions to discuss with you today, but welcome to the show. And Paul.
I wasn't quite ready for that, John, but what's
just
different?
You the
what's different?
Genius, Paul.
Yeah, it doesn't mean I'm ready.
Are you ready with the moment of the week, Paul?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with, it's something that happened this week. It is a group called Palestine Action. They have stopped a factory that was making arms for drones for Israel that were being used in Gaza to bomb people. They have stopped them from producing anything at all. The company have left due to direct action, due to blockades. They've sold to a different company that is apparently not going to be making weapons. So, and this is in Oldham. So this is a big victory for direct action. I'm certainly against, I'm not one of these people who says, oh, well, someone's going to sell them weapons. You know, I'm just like, don't sell weapons to people. Don't have blood on your hands. Don't do that kind of thing. So this is really good. It's worth a look on Twitter. I'm sure one of our wonderful listeners, viewers will share that tweet. If they don't, I will do that. But it's it's Elbit Ferranti have been forced to sell their factory, and a new company are going to come in their place. So it appears that there aren't any job losses either. So, you know, apparently you don't have to sell murder devices. in order to make money. Go
That's
capitalism.
fantastic. Particularly at the time when they're trying to stop any kind of sort of even passive action. Protests. That's fantastic news. Who shall I choose next? Laura Daly, Paul's wife. What moment of your week?
Oh, she's. No, I'm her husband.
My
she's not my
main
wife.
job is Paul's wife.
No, actually, that's my job. I'm Laura's husband. You see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really I know this part of the show is meant to be like, you know, easing us in and saying hello and all like nice and lighthearted and stuff. But I find this part of the show probably the most difficult because I've had to stop watching the news for my own mental health. So my moments of the week always tend to be like about myself. So my moment of the week, which I don't even think it falls into this week now, it's the moment of the break, has to be Socialist Think Tank's New Year's Eve show that we put out. It was really lovely. It was really positive, and there was a lot of like hope to come out of it, which I wasn't expecting because we were gonna basically talk about 2021 and do a recap of the year. So that part was a bit depressing because for obvious reasons. But then it was really nice, and we had Ian Hodson from the Bakers Union. We had Anna Rothery from Liverpool. Everyone knows who Anna is. And Jeremy Corbyn was on as well. Chantel and Dan and, you know, people who you've seen on our shows before. It was just really lovely and it was a really nice atmosphere and I'm dead glad we did it. And you can still catch it. It's still available. So go and watch it.
Will somebody be putting that link up on the comments, Laura?
Tim Dredge is watching the show, so I imagine he's probably already done it by now.
Thank you, Tim. You move in the most exalted circles, Laura. You're continually moving with movers and shakers of all kinds. Thank you very much for all you do.
Undeservedly so. I'm a hanger-on. I just refuse to accept no as an answer. That was a bit rapey, wasn't it? Sorry.
Samantha, news from you. Have you any news to tell us? What's your moment of the week? Or moment of the break?
Moment of the break. I'm sorry, I'm suffering with terrible lighting today because I'm in the dining room and I'm struggling without my little studio. My moment happened today where my MP, Deanna Davison, there's an article in the Northern Echo that says that she is definitely not going to defect to the Labour Party. And I'm just like, well, no, we weren't asking you to, hon. We don't want you. You wouldn't be invited. Bye-bye. This is because I think it was the Times or the Telegraph or one of these very right-wing papers actually ran a story suggesting that red wall MPs might be considering switching to Labour because Boris Johnson's popularity is going down. They're not doing that. They're just spending a lot of time stabbing him in the back so that they're ingratiated with whoever the new boss is. So she'd much rather do that than join the Labour Party, which is fine because we don't want it.
There's a question on the comments. Have you put the rest of the family in the cupboard then?
No, unfortunately, the rest of the family are upstairs trying to do a bedtime and they are being quite loud. So if you do hear screaming, don't worry. They're not in the cupboard. They're just reading Lord of the Rings.
Ah, really good. Fantastic. Fantastic play. Thank you, Sam. Don't they talk a lot of rubbish about Deanna? She's quite a news magnet, isn't she?
It's amazing. One tweet from her, instant half-page story, you know, and you do think it's not quite balanced, is it? In the local paper when you've got MPs like Mary Foy get a little footnote, you know, Graham Morris says something, he gets a little corner, Deanna Davison does a tweet and suddenly it's a whole page story. Yeah. No,
I agree. Thank you so much, Sam. And finally, Stuart, your moment of the week.
Well, my moment of the break was I went into the Christmas break with my daughter catching COVID. I'm assuming out of school. So we spent Christmas lockdown. Then we had 2 days of freedom, escape, where my daughter got to have a birthday party, and then my wife managed to get herself some COVID. And the heroic actions that they both took to make sure that I was safe, and I managed to survive COVID twice within my own household.
Awesome.
So, I mean, absolute momentous effort to make sure I didn't do or die. So, big thanks to them.
Do or die.
This thing is, I mean, Omicron is just so catchable, but it's when it comes into a household, the family just falls one after the other. The people fall in families. So thank goodness for that. Take care, Stuart. God bless. And I don't know. As I look at the comments, have anybody else fallen foul of COVID in your family? Sort of. And what was your experience of it? I hope that you've escaped, and if you didn't, I hope that it was very mild. Okay, thank you very much for your moments of the week, everybody.
Now it's time for the big story.
You know, this week there were just so many huge and interesting stories. Novak Djokovic, Prince Andrew's lawyers, breastfeeding voyeurs targeted. I mean, I felt sure that might raise a bit of interest. 5 of the world's most powerful nations pledged to avoid nuclear war. How can you not think that that's very important? We're on the verge of a major confrontation with Russia. That came way down. And then you've got a year on from the Capitol riot and a Tony Blair knighthood. No, none of those things made the cut. And your number one thing, I was amazed. But it's a really interesting issue with lots of tentacles into other areas. Emma Watson's pro-Palestinian post sparks anti-Semitism row. Paul, tell us all about this and how we need to think about it.
Okay, so Emma Watson from the Harry Potter films. She played Hermione in the Harry Potter films. Pretty famous. She's done other things as well. She's done also a lot of activism. So in her own right, she's been pretty sound politically and quite a few really good causes, a lot of good feminist causes, etc. But not really hugely thought of as in the kind of world of you know, Israel, Palestine, Middle Eastern politics. She's not really thought of that. She posted something on her Instagram which should be relatively innocuous, really, and it was the word solidarity as a verb, and in the background there were some Palestinian flags. So obviously this suggests solidarity with Palestine as a nation and their right to exist, and showing her solidarity to them. It might have just been something that she thought was really, really good to say solidarity as a verb. You know, it's something you do rather than something you just say, because like we heard a lot over COVID times, the Conservatives were using solidarity, weren't there, as a I don't know, for them it was just a thing to say to try to sound important. But anyway, she tweeted this, and then Ambassador Danny Dannon, if I mispronounced that, it's just because I've read it and I've read it wrong, but Danny Dannon, who apparently is an ambassador to the UN for Israel, retweeted it, quote tweeted it, and said 10 points from Gryffindor for being an anti-Semite. Now, for me, showing solidarity to Palestine is not anti-Semitic in the slightest. Anti-Semitism for me is a hatred of the Jews or some kind of I don't know, some kind of bad treatment, negative treatment of Jewish people. It could be unconscious, it could be conscious, but you know, it's got to be negativity towards Jewish people. Now that was positivity about the Palestinian state. Palestine, like, you know, most people in the world think the two-state solution, most people advocate for that, I suppose, on the world stage. So a two-state solution with Israel and Palestine existing. The idea that someone who is a representative of the Israeli state was saying to suggest such a thing would be anti-Semitic, it's really, really... for some, it might have moved the goalposts. For others, it might have shown where the goalposts have been for a while. You know, the idea of Palestine's existence, to him, appears to be anti-Semitic. Now, for me, I would have suggested that was an anti-Semitic statement to say that Jewish people do not want a Palestinian state to exist, and therefore the existence of a Palestinian state is anti-Semitic. You know what I mean? Like that, for me, that's an awful thing to say. I know so many Jewish people who are massive advocates for Palestine, the Israeli state, and Jewishness. Although Israel's a Jewish state, that does not mean anything. You know, it doesn't mean that Jewish people are all for the Israeli state. There is a massive variety of opinion, just like there is for any people, because, funnily enough, Jewish people are people, and they will have a variety of opinions on things. They do not think with one mind. So therefore, I am incredibly confused at this. I was shocked, but it's very interesting. I think it's probably had an extremely negative effect on this person's argument, on Ambassador Danny Dannon's argument, by picking on Emma Watson, the beloved Emma Watson. So she's gone up in my estimations. Well done to her. She didn't deserve the nastiness that came her way. And I agree with her. Solidarity is a verb.
There's one script just before we move on, Paul. Now, you said it yourself. You said that Israel is a Jewish state, and they actually passed a law in the Knesset saying that, asserting the Jewish identity of the state of Israel. And I think sort of the argument from that then is that therefore opposing Israel is in itself an anti-Semitic act. Now, how would you react to that statement? If Israel is a Jewish state, surely it is anti-Jewish to oppose the state of it, to criticize the state of Israel. That's the argument, isn't it?
I don't think it is the argument, because I'll address that argument in a second. But she said solidarity is a verb, and there's a few Palestinian flags on the picture. So that's nothing against, like, you know, the idea of
I think that would be
the suggestion.
Argument. I was suggesting that
it might be, but that's not what.
Danny Danone,
but that's clearly not what he's arguing. For me, that's clearly not what he's arguing. He's arguing that the existence of a Palestinian state is anti-Semitic, not the non-existence of an Israeli state, because she doesn't say, let's get rid of the Israeli state. There's no suggestion there. It's just simply saying solidarity with the Palestinian people. And as I said earlier on, most world leaders advocate, at least verbally, a two-state solution. Now, I don't believe that is actually what they're pushing for at all. I believe that they're pushing for a one-state solution in which Israel controls the entire region in a lot of cases. However, that is not what that tweet says. It's just simply saying solidarity with Palestine doesn't mean you hate Israel. You know, like you might disagree with some of Israel's actions, but that doesn't mean you want it not to exist as well. So.
What Danny Danone said was that the Hamas deny the existence of Israel, that they are terrorist state attacking Israel, and that therefore to support them was anti-Semitic, because it was attacking the state of Israel. Now, there is an answer to that, but I'm inviting you to share your thoughts on it.
Well, again, I don't think talking about Palestine necessarily means Hamas. You know, we've had a Palestinian special on here, and there's there was no representatives of Hamas on there, but there were people who lived in Palestine and had dreadful treatment by the Israeli state in Palestine. The fact that I have a problem with the actions of the Israeli state does not mean I have a problem with Israeli people, and does not mean I have a problem by extension, and this would be a huge extension because Jewish people are from all around the world, Israel and further afield. There are some people who actually Jewish people who disagree with the idea that there should be an Israel. They believe that the Jewish people should be a nomadic people without a state. There are some people who have a completely secular idea and think that there should be no religious states whatsoever. You know, like I would say I would prefer states, if they exist at all, to be secular. So his argument there is absolutely appalling. He's leapt to some sort of conclusion. I believe it was for I don't believe this was an innocent act. I believe this is in order to diminish the right of Palestine to exist, and Palestinian people to exist. And I believe that it's he who has had the aggressive, has done the aggressive thing here. And I believe that, again, Israel are incredibly aggressive in their government's actions towards Palestine and Palestinian people. And we've seen, like, you know, obviously Desmond Tutu died recently, and his ideas around this were that Israel were behaving in an apartheid fashion that was worse than what went on in South Africa. That's Desmond Tutu's words, not mine. So, you know, I think we really need to have a look at this, and I think it's shone a light on and I think a lot of young people will be looking at that and thinking, what in the world is this man trying to do to Emma Watson for apparently no reason, or a very misguided reason?
Thank you, Paul. Sam, I mean, I think I agree with Paul that sort of Emma Watson has thrown this issue into stark relief. She's certainly put it on the world stage by speaking out and by receiving the reaction she got. I mean, do you think that's been a good thing?
It's complicated, and it's one of these things where, like, people who are very aware of the intricacies and the complications surrounding the issue struggle to talk about it eloquently and accurately. So to expect, and to be fair to her, she's got obviously a lot of experience of working in lots of like charitable organizations, but still, top of the bottom of the day, she's an actress, right? So it's not really actually her specialist subject. You can't expect somebody to be able to write a thesis on something which isn't actually what their job is, you know. So, and I think that the same goes for sort of her followers and the people who follow her. So I think you've got to be careful, just because you're throwing it into the spotlight, that you get the right people talking on it in order to properly illuminate the subject, rather than just having lots of people on Twitter shouting at each other. Twitter's not a great place to have an illuminating dialogue. It is a great place to throw hate around and to blow a throwaway comment totally out of context. So I think, you know, yes, I'd like everybody to have more awareness of the very complex nature of the whole situation, but probably Twitter's not the best place to do it.
I mean, Emma Watson, she's a UN Women's Goodwill Ambassador. So she is used to making political comments on the world stage. So by going through, by going so public onto social media, do you think that she misjudged the issue?
I think she probably, like you say, she probably knows what she's doing, and it's probably, you know, yes, it's always good to talk about things, but like I said, I don't think Twitter's a great place to have that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, my personal feeling is that in a way she called out those people whose immediate reaction to any criticism of Israel is that this is anti-Semitic. Even any support for the Palestinian people is anti-Semitic per se, and sort of it just threw that issue into stark relief. And all the best for it. Thanks for your comments, Stuart. Do you think this is? I'm not going to ask you this question. We all have children whom we love, and it's possible to love our children and want the very best for them, and still to be furious about certain things that they do, and to be very critical of things that they're doing and saying. And sort of in the same way, is it possible to be a supporter of the state of Israel and pro-Israel and yet be furious about the things that they're doing in Palestine? Is that a fair statement, do you think?
I think it's absolutely true that any person who is a friend of people is a friend of Jewish people, and that, you know, the only real agenda here is to want to care for all people and to see some, you know, equality and justice for all. I think that's the, you know, the underlying message that we want to get through. Clearly, short and often vague comments on Twitter and the sphere that you want to maybe use for anti-racism education, you know, such short, snappy, almost biting type responses aren't a place perhaps to discuss a really nuanced anti-racist argument.
When you say that, are you referring to Emma Watson's statement or to Danny Danone's response?
I think Danny Danone's response is inherently snappy, as Twitter tends to be as a platform. It's designed to make you respond in a way that isn't going to give a great amount of detail. Again, with most tweets that go out, they're not packed with the reasoning behind things or the evidence to an argument often. So it's not really the best platform to be having any of these kind of conversations. But I think there's a missed opportunity there to actually do some, you know, anti-racism education on a platform. That's not really been picked up on as such. And certainly with the kind of audience that you might expect of Emma Watson with regards to Harry Potter, you're now introducing a very complex situation to perhaps younger audiences who won't know how to go about discussing, you know, this very complex situation. It's a difficult arena.
Now, you see, can I challenge you as well?
Absolutely.
I don't think that there's anything complex about it. I think the way that Israel is treating the Palestinians, the state, the Palestinians, particularly in Gaza, is just a cut and dried right and wrong. It is wrong, and it's very clearly wrong. Paul mentioned the word apartheid. I think it's a kind of sort of quasi-genocide, if you care to look at it that way. And sort of when Emma Watson says solidarity is a verb, what she's saying is that we need to do more than just say, oh, those poor Palestinians, that we sort of need to take action to support the Palestinians. Now, I think that's a cut and dried. I don't see that as nuanced or complex.
I think the subject matter is very cut and dry, as you say. It's the approach that you take to discussing it. That is, you know, like anything, even if you were knocking somebody's door to try and win their support in an election, it all comes down to how you have that conversation. And that's the real battle for anybody to try and make a change in the world, isn't it? It's about how you approach the situation, the arena that you find yourself in. Trying to make an argument is the most difficult part of it, rather than the actual subject matter that you want to talk about.
Thank you, Stuart, for your wisdom. Laura, finally, and this is where it becomes relevant to the Labour Party, so we understand that you'll want to speak wisely, and you may not want to, but at the end of the day, I spoke earlier about the fact that immediately you start to criticise Israel, there are some people, despite the fact that the HWR working arrangement says that it's okay to criticise Israel, but they immediately cry anti-Semitism, particularly in relation to Palestinians. I mean, do you think that this will have done anything to call that out, to highlight that as an issue within the Labour Party?
I mean, I would hope so. I would really hope so. I think this whole thing is just, it's become such a mess, hasn't it? It's, being labelled an anti-Semite is such a hurtful accusation, especially for somebody who's so vehemently anti-racist. And I think comments like Denone's and Erdan, the current ambassador, who had some horrible things to say on Twitter as well, that it's cynical weaponization of it for me. It really is. And I just think it's a good way to silence free speech on this. It's a good way to shut down the support for Palestine because people are too scared to say anything. And I think my view of it is, you can't conflate a government or the actions of the state of Israel with Jewishness. That in itself is anti-Semitic. If I criticize the things that the Israeli government are doing, that doesn't mean I don't like Jewish people. In the same breath, I criticize every single day the things that Boris Johnson's doing. Does that make me anti-Christian? And I think we've gone so far down that rabbit hole now within the Labour Party as well. The Labour Party, this has been a subject that has been at the top of our agenda for many years. With everything that happened with Jeremy Corbyn and definitely this, of course, anti-Semitism is an issue. All racism is an issue and should be stamped out 100%. Like, that is not even an argument. That's not a debate we have with anyone. But I think this particular one, and I think Emma Watson has fallen right into this trap as well. And because she's so high profile and she said something in support of Palestine, everybody's jumped on it and gone, oh, anti-Semite, to scare people from wanting to have their say on it. And so people keep their mouths shut. And so Palestinian support diminishes, and there'll be no advocates left for oppressed people, and you say quasi-genocide there, John. I'd suggest there's not a lot of quasi-ness about it.
You're a wonderful team. Thank you so much for all those very deep and outspoken comments. I'm sure that the people listening will have valued the things you had to say. We'll now move on, hopefully to something less contentious. Corruption, Stuart. Can Boris Johnson just do as he damn well pleases and lie about it and continue to get away with it? The question on the poll was in relation to the Great Exhibition text, when he was clearly selling favours for money to help him decorate. But since we've had all this outcry about a bring your own booze party, what have you got to say about this, Stuart?
I think the big question is Boris Johnson corrupt? The answer would be yes. I think across the board on everything he does and touches at this point. Clearly, this story came about after they managed to find the missing phone. After he'd already said sorry for getting his house decorated, and it being paid by somebody else. He said sorry for that apparently, and now it's come out that he's found the phone that he forgot he had, and there's a series of text messages that show quite clearly that he's been selling access and he's been selling influence to this Lord Dowden to get his flat decorated. And it states quite clearly in one of them that essentially access for this great exhibition would be removed if Lulu didn't get the right to stick some more paper up. So yeah, it's a bit of a mess on that. But he's broke no rules again. He said sorry, and because this is being treated as a second incident, it's not. They're not looking at the original incident of where he got the money put forward. It's a separate issue. He's just said sorry twice, slap on the wrist, now to happen about it. And then this morning, it's an email has been discovered, which was an invitation to a garden party for 100 people to bring your own bottle. I understand, obviously, while we were in a lockdown where we couldn't, I believe, basically we couldn't see more than 6 people at the time. So this was clearly organised by Downing Street. It was their email lists. They were expecting 100 people. They were expecting people to be having a drink, getting drunk, which is in itself is difficult to maintain distancing in. Absolutely no rules for them. Will he get a slap on the wrist? Will he blame somebody else? Has he got somebody else to chuck under the bus? We don't know.
I mean, all the time there's this continual drip of scandal. I mean, the things I sent through were that Lady Moan, who's sort of got shares secretly in a company that was awarded PPE contract, and on it goes and on it goes. I watched that film Anne, that series Anne, and how many years did it take them? 23 years to get and still nobody has actually been held accountable for that. This is the establishment. Is this just another example, Stuart, of the establishment just getting away with everything?
I think there's a sense that they can do it, that the only real people that the answer to is voters at a general election, that there's no consequences for any of them. And it turns your stomach, because we have, as a nation, gone through a pretty rough time, and we've all tried very hard for each other. And they haven't tried even the slightest, not one iota have they tried to even stay on par with us, or, as you would expect, set an example for the nation. They have taken every opportunity to stick money in their pockets, make mates, give mates money, have big house parties. We must be the laughing stock of the world as a government. I can't say that any other place in the world right now this would happen without somebody ending up in prison, but here we are.
Thank you, Stuart. Laura, do you think that it's finally beginning to hit home? I mean, certainly the Tories seem to be going down in the polls. Do you think that people are eventually realising what a corrupt government they've managed to elect?
I know better than to trust polls, John. Never trust a poll. I honestly don't know. It does feel like they're taking the mick, and that they're just now seeing what else they can get away with. And it seems like, really, honestly, by now, it shouldn't have taken this long to see through Boris Johnson. He's went out of his way to protect Owen Paterson. He gave Matt Hancock's mate, how much was it, 30 million for a PPE contract, having never done it before. He promised the British public 350 million pound a week for the NHS, and then he cut 65 million for fire services. The list is just unreal. We could do a show just listing things that he's promised and hasn't delivered on, or things that he's done behind closed doors that he shouldn't have done and gotten away with. So I think the British public are well aware of the type of person he is, and either there's too much apathy and people are just like, meh, well, it is what it is. They're in charge, so they get a say, or people are on their knees, which I believe to be the majority of the case, just trying to get through the day and think, what on earth could I possibly do to change it? This is the situation I'm in. I'm going to have to live with it. And, you spend many years without a decent opposition and no one's really taken them to task. And like, we don't have the media on our side as well. So when we do want to highlight these issues, where do we go? So yeah, the British public, of course, they know. We know what he's like, and we can't laugh this off anymore. We can't just go, "Hey, Boris, bless him." He's killing people with his decisions and his legislation, and he knows exactly what he's doing as well, because now they're making it even more difficult to say anything against it. If I go outside with a placard, I might get arrested now because of I'm making such a civil disobedience. And it's like, they know what they're doing and they continue to get away with it, and it'll keep continuing to get away with it unless this is a theme that is ongoing on this show. Every week somebody talks about the mobilization of the people, getting us all together behind a common goal. That goal really does need to be fairness and equality and getting rid of the elite establishment that we have had for decades and decades, under various different guises, that have ran this country basically into the ground, and now we're a tax haven for rich billionaires.
Thank you. Yes. Neil, Terry, it's not Boris that's the problem, it's the system that props it up. Thank you very much. Paul, you have a slightly different, I saw your Facebook affirmation of your tweet. You have a slightly different view on this, don't you?
Yeah, so I actually think this is noise. I think I know exactly what kind of people they are. I've always known exactly what kind of people they are. They were always the kind of people who would be partying while telling you not to, because we have been introduced and shaped by a system where we are told to be subservient. So we're told that we have betters. We're told this throughout. Like, the Queen exists, she is better than us, and she is better than the aristocracy, who are better than, and this system filters down. We've got this in our national psyche that somehow we really aren't as important as them, and when they do things, it's actually not that bad because they are better than us. And this has got into the bones of the country, I think. People really aren't willing. Like, we're soft as shit. We are soft as shit. We have taken a kicking from these. What am I angry about? I knew exactly what they were doing. I am furious that they were having parties and telling other people not to. I wouldn't have been had they been in a situation where I said, you know what? We're working together day in and day out. We're right next to one another. Actually, it's going to make no difference if we improve our mental health a little bit and let off some steam, because we're going to catch COVID from each other if someone in here has it. It's not a massively great risk. And we talked about this at my work when we were getting coughed all over and stuff by kids and then told we couldn't speak to anyone else. We weren't allowed to socialise outside of work, even if it was on the path outside of work. We had to go home straight away. We weren't allowed to have a drink with one another. And if we'd have been allowed to maybe have a little chat with one another, maybe things would have been slightly better during lockdown. I don't actually have a problem with that. The problem is telling people what to do when they weren't doing that. But the real problem for me is if you go back far enough, if you go back like a couple of years or last week or anything like that, you'll find that these people are doing appalling things. Appalling things. They are killing people with austerity. Loads of people have died due to austerity. PIP assessments humiliated people and killed people. The parties didn't kill anyone. Why are we more angry about a party than we are about our government killing its own people with awful neglect and just vicious policies? So this is the problem that we've got if we look at what we're getting angry for. And the reason they're getting angry for is this is the media. This is so they can shuffle the pack. Let's bring in Michael Gove. He's a good guy. Let's bring in Michael Gove. He was great with education. They genuinely think that. The man was an absolute disaster for education. He is horrible. He's allegedly coked up all the time, just like Boris is allegedly coked up all the time. These are things that, these people should not be in charge of the country. But then we've got another layer of establishment to protect them even. The media aren't going to let any real change happen. They will get up in arms about something like this. Maybe it's time for Boris to go. Maybe that's what they'll say. And I saw the leader of the Conservatives in Sunderland Council today basically said Boris has to go. And he probably will, over time. But he'll be replaced with someone just as horrible. They might work harder, but whoever it is, their policies will be just as heartless, just as damaging, just as self-serving, giving money to donors while putting COVID into care homes by releasing COVID patients into care homes as a policy. That's something to be furious about.
Sam, so just to comment on you, Paul, I think that what they're doing is they're letting Boris suffer all the acrimony, all the hatred, all the anger. What they'll do is they'll ditch him sometime during this year or next. Then they'll have a new person and they'll hold an election. And I hope that people believe that it's a clean slate. Sam, Mark Lungley, I think people are more fed up about the parties because of the British sense of fair play.
Yeah, it's a really good comment from Mark. Also, I think there's just a real simple, obvious, you can't make any excuses for it. And I agree, I'm upset about all the people who were sent into care homes, knowing that they had COVID, knowing that the staff didn't have the appropriate training to isolate infected patients or the facilities to do so. I'm angry about nurses wearing bin bags for PPE, but people find ways to explain these things away. Oh well, it's not the government's fault. It's the healthcare company's fault. It's the care company who should have had the appropriate PPE. Oh well, he's doing his best. It was a totally nobody predicted that it was going to happen, even though everybody predicted it was going to happen. There's all these excuses people have been using, but there is really no excuse that can excuse having a garden party while you're literally telling people that they can only meet one other person in a public place while social distancing. There's no way to excuse that. It's just so simple. And I think that's something that's really struck a nerve as well.
Just finally, Sam, yes or no, is this the end of Johnson?
I think this shows that the end of Johnson is coming. Unfortunately, it's going to be a bit of a drawn-out process, but, the Tories, like I said earlier, the backbenchers are smelling blood. They're doing their best to stab a knife into him so that they can be in the good graces of whoever comes after. So the process is definitely underway, but I'm sure, as they all do, he will fall upwards.
Thanks, people, for those comments. Next question: Colston statues. I'm really biased about this. I'm not a very good host about this, but let me what do you reckon, Laura, to the fact that the BLM protesters were cleared over the toppling of the Edward Colston statue?
I have a funny feeling that I'm going to be a bit one-sided on this one as well, John. Yes, they were recently being cleared, but there is that is ongoing. Actually, I've just read about it tonight. But yeah, so there's loads of uproar. Especially, there's a lot of Tory MPs who are saying they're appalling. And what was one of them said? We need to be more anti-woke. Just it shows a clear misunderstanding of the reasons behind the toppling of that statue. Edward Colston was a very, 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 very well-known slave trader, but but there's a lot of people saying, oh, he's a philanthropist, and it completely just washes over the whole colonialism of it and doesn't look into the slave trade that we had here. And it's really depressing and really upsetting. So this was a proper victory for the anti-racist cause, I think. But the Attorney General's now saying that she may take it back to the Court of Appeal. And people are saying that was just a political maneuvering from her, because she's originally said that, she's backing what the Tory MPs are saying. And, this is, it's something that it's our history and we should celebrate it, and we shouldn't, we should be appalled that this has been, civil disobedience or what have you. But then on the other side of it, she's saying, oh no, because she's had a lot of pushback from that, but actually now she's saying, oh well, no, what I want to do, because the case was so confusing and difficult for people to understand, I want to take it to the appeals court so we can clarify the law for any future cases that come, showing clearly that she's been accused here of wanting to sort of up her own profile, and I think that's exactly what she's doing. She's trying to play both sides. But yeah, it's absolutely the right thing. And if it starts the conversation about us having a look at actually what people we are sort of vilifying and what people we are celebrating, and how that translates into statues and representations of these people up and down the country, we really need to start having that conversation now. We need to really be thinking, do we really want to have somebody who traded over 800,000 people in our streets? Do we want to sort of have that lording over us as our great achievement? I think probably not. And I think anybody who essentially wants those statues to stay up and wants them to be celebrated, you can like them for the fact somebody's put some hard work into actually physically building a statue. Let's say that is really hard work. Well done, good on you. But we can't be celebrating these people, and by saying I want to celebrate this person, you are outing yourself as a racist, and that is just a fact. So yeah, I do think this has been a really bit of good news for once. I'm really pleased. I think the Court of Appeal thing will just fall flat on its face, because I just don't think there's an argument here. And I hope it will breed a revolution in terms of what people we celebrate and what statues we look up to.
Thank you. I mean, Paul, that there was a fantastic article in The Conversation about the fact that there are legal grounds, strong legal grounds for this being the right decision, that the jury took the right decision. This wasn't a rogue decision by the jury at all. And I don't know whether you saw that article, the questions that the judge made them ask. But as I read that, actually, it came to be clear that there are now strong reasons which allow you to, in fact, take actions such as this. There are grounds on which you can validly take actions such as they did, toppling this statue and shoving it into the dock. Do you think this is a step forward for our freedoms of protest?
It's really interesting. I think I had to get my head around the idea of why it was legal. So there's always someone who'll say to you something like that. They can't do that because it is criminal damage or whatever. And you think, I suppose it is, but sometimes I would always go down the lines of sometimes when laws are a bit crap, you got to break them. And especially in the case of this, where they've brought up this petition time and again to get it removed. And but apparently it's because they were the people of Bristol. And that statue was representing the people of Bristol. If the people of Bristol wanted it to come down, and they believed that they were doing something that they thought caused offence. So because this caused such offence to people, the people of Bristol, then therefore they were justified in what they were doing because they thought they were upholding the law. And that was it's a really interesting legal argument, and I thought it was. I was pleased to learn about what it was. I sometimes think to like what people would do, like, you know, would people, when they saw the statue of Saddam Hussein come down, and I know it's a little bit different, but in a way, Colston was someone who chucked 20,000 slaves into the sea because, you know, they were not healthy and they weren't going to make them some money. So 20,000 people thrown overboard, that kind of thing. This guy was not a good guy. Were the people saying, actually, you know, Saddam Hussein is part of Iraq's history, that statue needs to stay up? It's been a funny little argument I've seen going on, and it's really nice to see a few people getting riled up by it.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got to cut you off because we're running out of time, as we always do, Paul. God bless you. Sam, is the right place for this statue, therefore, in a museum where it can be properly addressed, the pros and the cons, and not in a park where it's an object of veneration?
Chuck it in the sea. No. I think, you know, that's a really good point. You know, there is a middle ground between destroying these things and leaving them where they are, and that is putting them in a museum where they can be studied and where they can have a proper education program around who they were, how they got their power, and why it was a terrible thing. And you know, I was having this conversation with Laura the other day. You know, there's a statue in the middle of Durham marketplace, and local people just know it as like that statue of the horse. Yeah. In the middle, and it's a man on the back of that horse, and that man owned coal mines and he subjugated the working people of County Durham to make profit off people's blood, sweat.
A complete bastard, Samantha.
Yes, indeed.
An absolute bastard.
And people don't know that, and people should know that. Rather than just go, oh, isn't that a nice statue of a horse?
There's no tongue.
No, it's not a nice statue of a horse.
I was about to sort of say, I mean, sort of, do you think that we should knock down that statue as well? I mean, should that statue go?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's something to talk about whether it's an appropriate thing to have in the middle of Durham City Centre. Yes, there'll be people say, oh, we've had it there forever, it's part of the culture or whatever. But there's an awful lot of culture that stick a traffic cone on his head, Mark Lungley says. I could think of a few things I'd stick on his head. But you know, it might be one that I would recommend relocating to the new history centre with a nice big explanation of what he was and what he did.
Thank you, Sam. Finally, Stuart, and I've totally mistimed the lesson. This teacher's messed up. So, Stuart, here's a thing I want you to address. I sometimes they're saying we need to take down the statue of Captain Cook in Whitby. And this is a man who really sort of was an amazing man and expanded our knowledge and seafaring ability. He discovered the way to end scurvy at sea and all these things. An amazing chap. But he was a man of his time, and he expanded empire. And I sometimes feel sorry for these people because they did great things, and we look at them with our retrospective glasses on and say, whoa, that was unacceptable. But it wasn't unacceptable when he did it. Do you think there's any excuse for some of these poor chappies, and they're mainly chappies, aren't they? Sort of these poor chaps who sort of just got out of date.
I think we have good examples in history of how we've dealt with this in the past. If you look at post-war Germany, you know, there was Nazi stuff everywhere. Those statues were taken down in a process over several years, and you went through a process. And in the modern era, you don't listen to music by people who have been convicted of certain things. You don't watch Rolf Harris reruns anymore, do you? You can pick and choose what you want as part of your modern culture. And I think that we need to have a process where we go and look at properly at the pros and cons of what we want to keep, what we want to forget, what we can put in a museum and have a proper discussion about. And we don't really need to just say we're going to take down every statue overnight. We need to have a proper discussion about it, and across a multitude of things, not just, you know, the slave trade. We need to be looking at, as Sam touched on, the oppression of people in Durham. I mean, that horse and the gentleman in the back, I really love when people complain it's the wrong way around. And it's doing him an injustice. That always makes me smile that he's the wrong way around. Because that's the best we've got for a little while.
Just to the listeners, you know, I just spring these questions on people, and most of them I just make up in my head is sort of during the last comment, and the wisdom and the depth of the answer and the common sense they speak is just a delight, isn't it? It's now 10 o'clock. Sam, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to lead on the thing. I'm not going to ask anybody else. You'll just have to sit there, shush. Sam, just your question was, how is the government coping with Omicron, and sort of what are your fears for the future?
Well, exactly. I mean, the government seems to have not worked out that, you know, an illness is not just bad if you die from it. An illness can have lots of other problems associated with it as well. And usually, if somebody's got to be ill, they might have to have some time off work. Now, let's not even go into isolation periods or the rest of it. This is the fact. If we had a virulent cold or flu spreading through the population like Omicron was, we would have exactly the same problem that we're having now, which is that people are getting sick. So they've got to have time off work. And unfortunately, our schools, our hospitals, our police stations, our council offices are all run by people who can get sick. So we're having a real issue with our public services crumbling at the moment. You know, we're actually at the point where within the next week or two, we can expect schools to have to inform parents that they're not going to be available to be open for all year groups because they're not going to have the staff to teach kids safely. And there's been literally no support put in place by the government. And that is the government's job. I know this government doesn't like, you know, getting the hands dirty and actually doing the job, but it is their job to make sure these basic building blocks of society work properly. All they could do for teachers was send us a link to some supply teaching websites so that people like me who have been supply teachers and chose to leave because I'm not going to work for £60 a day, well, you can just go back and do that. No, if I wanted to do that, I would be doing it. Thanks very much. So yeah, it's a total mess based on the fact that the government haven't worked out that sick people can't go to work.
Thank you. I'm not going back to school either. I couldn't cope. How you teachers cope, Paul? I don't know. How I did it when I did it, I can't imagine. It's thank you so much for those comments, Sam. Sorry, everybody else. If you've got something burning to say, I'm so sure Sam will let you chirp up in her bit. That's it, people. Fantastic, don't you think? Aren't they brilliant? Love this hour of common sense with the Dream Team. What's going to happen now is that Paul's going to play some music, and hopefully the right music this time. And and when we come back, Sam is going to be in charge and look at some of your comments. Thank you for all your comments. Thank you for listening. And if you've got to go, bye-bye, but perhaps see you for the second half. Thank you.
My name is Jack Atkins and I'm not afraid. And I live and die by this vow that I've made. The only good fascist, a dead one, they say. And around the rear we are. when I first left all them months ago. I told him I'd come not to kill but to cure. Well, for an ambulance driver my shot's pretty sure. Panorama we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. I told my mother, now mother, be strong, for the left way is right and the right way is wrong. And you can stick that on my grave when I'm gone, for I'm a real we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. Fascists have come for our freedom, we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. Cast may be cast, and the cast may be cast, but you armies of darkness, you best do your worst. 'Cause to win, yeah, well, you gotta get past us first, and around here we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here, no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. The red flag flying here.
Welcome back. I'm Samantha Townsend. It's really nice to see you for the second half. I'm going to be leading the show. I can't do as good a job as Samantha. I'm not really Samantha at all. I'm Paul. But Samantha has grown weary at this late hour, and So what we're going to do is we are going to have me lead this because I am the person who has got the technological capability to do it. As John says, I'm the technological wizard, which is complete nonsense. But, let's go with it as well. Let's pretend that's true. And we'll go through some of your comments. Your comments were particularly amazing as well, as always, isn't a really good thing to say after you're saying particularly amazing, even better than normal, which was absolutely brilliant. So we're going to go through a few of those and discuss them as a group. So what I want to do is quickly, on that last point, Omicron, shall we quickly go through it? And John, I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you think about the way the government's treating Omicron with regards to your last question? Is the government sleepwalking towards disaster, something like that?
Got it yesterday, and the average for the week is only 170,000. It was much worse than this last week, and sort of there's only 8,000 people in hospital, and sort of only 171 died, and you think these are horrific figures. The thing is just exploding, and I think they're throwing the NH under a bus. And you think, why are they not? Why are they? And the biggest thing of all is this this sneaking thing that's coming into more and more Tory members' speech, that we need to learn to live with this. It's not a pandemic. We need to understand that now it's endemic, and it's all right. Is that if sort of you're triple vaccinated and a healthy person, and it's highly likely that it'll be very mild if you get it. What about those people for whom it isn't mild? By sheer chance, it's very unmild and it kills them. And what about those people for sort of like my wife and Stuart, for whom just to get it is highly likely a death sentence, and sort of they can shut themselves away if they want, and that's the kind of argument that's going on. And I find the whole thing very, very disturbing indeed, and the normalization of 170 people dying a day. We go mad about the number of people who are knocked down and killed on the roads, and sort of it's the number of people who've died, Paul, is now 2.5 times the number of people whom the Nazis killed on the home front in World War II. And we do, we got to get used to this, get used to it. I'm horrified by the laxity, and it's the only government that's doing it. The other nations are actively taking measures to try and halt its spread, and why the Tory government are pursuing this line, I just do not know. But my golly, am I hostile to it.
Fair. So. Yeah, does anyone else want to add to that, or do we want to go to the comments here? What do we think, people? Laura?
Oh.
You coming in, Stuart?
Because there's always, the people who get treated worse in any situation, and once again, it's disabled people, it's vulnerable people, it's old people, it's people with deficiencies in their immune system. And when a government says learn to live with it, what they're saying is you people are going to die. And that's what it's come down to. We are happy to take that on board, that you've been at home for 2 years. Some of you have killed yourselves out of, committed suicide, because of the sheer pressure and magnitude of the impounding factors on your lives. other than just the COVID. And they've decided that it's fine. It's absolutely fine to go back to work while thousands of people essentially are given a death sentence. And we see the news. People are reading the papers saying, oh, well, there's going to be no PCR tests for asymptomatic people. And people who are holed up at home, lonely, isolated to the very extreme now for what must be months on end for some people, no proper contact. They're just being told, get ready to die.
Paul, I'm just, thank you, Stuart. Sorry, I'm not diminishing what you've said, which is absolutely true. I'm getting lots of people saying that they can't hear what I'm saying, but I'm not muted on my...
It's fixed now. So just to explain what happened there. I have things to do on this, so I had to set up a whole load of new screens and then present a section that I'm not used to presenting. So yeah, that is totally my fault. So but please do forgive me. So yeah, you are audible now, John. Everyone's audible.
You mean, all those words those are words of amazing wisdom, sort of.
Nah, it was about 10 seconds. It was about 10 seconds. So.
This is an outrage, Paul. I think I'll protest about it. Sort of.
It's part of the charm of the show. It's usually myself who I mute for long periods of time, and I'm yammering away, and everyone's saying Paul's chewing a brick. So it's normally when I'm talking nonsense. Actually, it's so I can pretend I was funny when it comes back. Oh, I said something really funny. And everyone else laughed out of pity. But so yeah, that's where we are. Coming on to the questions. Neil Terry, it's funny how Johnson was in ICU in April 2020 due to COVID, and he seems to be okay with taking risks with it. Was he lying? There's been some weird speculation about that, but we're not endorsing that. But that is a comment. There, it does make people think about where's his compassion. I would probably suggest that he's devoid of normal compassion rather than that. Although he does lie about a lot of things, so it's not a surprise that people might challenge that. Kath Conroy, my son didn't die of COVID, but died due to COVID causing mental illness due to lockdown. These people aren't being counted. This is a huge deal that hasn't been addressed. I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier on, didn't I, about people's mental health and stuff. But Laura, do you want to come in on this? Because I know you've got a lot of strong feelings
I have a lot to say.
On lockdown mental health.
Yeah,
I'm really
first of all,
sorry
Kath,
about that as well,
really
Kath. That's
sorry.
absolutely awful, and
heartbreaking,
love and solidarity
isn't it?
to you.
Lockdown itself has been really devastating on the mental health of many, many, many people in this country, myself being one of them, as Paul will attest to. I'm better now. But also not just that, the side effects, long COVID, it's absolutely crippling. And to be fair, if the government are going to say, oh, well, just learn to live with the disease itself, then they're really not going to care about any hangovers from it, but it's debilitating. I know loads of people who are suffering with long COVID at the minute, and you just can't function as a human being. And then so that increases your isolation, it increases your inability to do anything but sit and think. And anyone left alone, not getting any fresh air, not with anything to do, with too much time to think, is going to end up with mental health problems, especially if we've already got them, because of the nature of our society at the minute, the way it's structured against working class people. It is, as Stuart rightly said, it is always us. It's always the working class. It's always the less well off. It's always people with disabilities. It's always people who need that extra bit of support who get forgotten about. And these are the people who are going to be suffering from things like long COVID, from things like mental illness due to lockdown, being isolated in your house. Some people have the luxury of working from home, but it's not necessarily a luxury. It is really difficult if you're in the house on your own for weeks and weeks on end. But also, what about all the people who haven't had any option, who have had to go to work, all the nurses, all the people who work in supermarkets, all these people who we said were lifesavers and were amazing and key workers, are still classed as, unskilled. And they didn't have a choice. They had to put themselves on the firing line. That in itself causes mental health problems. I need to feed me kids. I need a roof over my head. I'm going to have to put myself in the way of danger. Not one bit of this is being talked about, except from people like us, from activists, from people on these sorts of shows who think this is a serious problem. This is going to impact us and our kids for years and years to come. And there were no mental health services before this, so why should there be any after? But the government need to really start taking it seriously, because this is going to keep going. This is going to seriously affect people for years to come. And I don't have any hope. Like, it'd be lovely, but I don't have any hope that this government will do anything. All we can do is get rid of them and hopefully rely on our communities to do what they've been doing all along, and checking on each other and trying to help as best they can. But it really does need to be taken much more seriously, because it's devastating.
Yeah, John, I'll bring you in a second. I was just going to add to that a little bit, that some people don't really seem to understand one another's experiences here, and I'll give you a quick anecdote. Like, I've seen people have a go at people for not wearing a mask in a workplace. Now, the difference there being that people who have to be face-to-face with people all the time and are getting coughed all over all the time really don't see that as being a thing anymore. Like, a lot of people don't think, well, wearing a mask, I'm going to get coughed at, it's going to go in my eyes or whatever. These aren't really issues, whereas the other person in that situation is able to lock themselves in a room and keep social distance from people and sit and wear a mask, and it's kind of like a different world and different pressures. And some people go, oh no, if I go near someone I'm going to catch COVID. Another person who's already accepted that they are inevitably going to catch COVID. It's a really strange situation. John?
I was just going to build on what Laura had said, and speaking as a historian, the bubonic plague, the Black Death, had an absolutely catastrophic effect upon the attitudes and beliefs of people in Western Europe, in Europe generally. It completely overturned the economy. It completely overturned the social structures, but it was absolutely infused with this utter despair and the pointlessness of life. Now, I don't think COVID has been, you have to understand that the Black Death, 2/3 of the people in some places died. And it was, in terms of death, it was much worse. And of course, they didn't have any medical cures. Prayer was the only answer, and it clearly didn't work. So the effects perhaps were greater, but nevertheless, you're absolutely right, Laura. This government needs to take into account the fact that Britain, the world, our mindset will be permanently affected by the things we've been through in the last 2 years. It's going to change so many things. It's not just a matter of people having mental health problems. It's about everybody having mental health changes to them. And we'll have to wait and see how those outwork over the next 2 decades, I think.
Stuart, did you want to come in? Because I do have a question for you on a different topic, but feel free to come in.
Just thinking of how much we really need like a proper post-COVID government and economy, how different it needs to be, where we come out of this starting to create caring jobs, where, we move into automized workplaces as, the benefits of technology, but we're also creating a social care system, a social welfare system that really looks after people and, it is inherently designed to care for people through their lives. attached to the health service and the education services that we need. You know, we can build a brand new world right after this. We all know, we've all suffered the same thing. We've all had the same enemy. We've got that shared experience and we can do it. You know, we all know what we want from life and we need to start bloody asking for it and telling people this is our expectation for what we want in the future. We don't want jetpacks. We want stability and caring and not getting news off ITV telling us that we ain't going to have tests and we're all going to die. Tories.
I think they often as well, they are making quite a lot of, let's say, capital out of the fact that, we're unprecedented prices and therefore the NHS is struggling. NHS is struggling because it's been underfunded for years. The NHS has struggled for every year since probably before this, but 2016 was when it really hit, and we had people lying in corridors, and remember all those scenes for every single winter. So this is not a new thing for the NHS to be struggling, and the idea that they're putting things off because of COVID is a little bit unforgivable, and I think we should never let them forget that we do remember that it's austerity that's caused these problems. Obviously, the pandemic has been an awful thing, but that is not what's caused the problems in the NHS. The problems in the NHS have been there for a very long time. John?
Just going back to what Stuart said as well, it just resonated with me. One of the things that turned the Iraq war, which was a mistake and a bad thing, into the disaster it turned out to be, was the lack of an exit plan. They went in there, they knew how they were going to win it, but they didn't know what on earth they were going to do when they'd won it. And we all saw what a disaster. Compare that to the Second World War, where from 1942, they were talking and discussing in factories, in women's mothers' unions and things like that, the kind of world they wanted to come out into after the war, when it finished. They came out, people were very clear about what they wanted. And sort of the differences, and Stuart's absolutely right, we have no exit plan for COVID. And it's typical of this sloppy, no good, useless government who just sort of reactive, absolutely, and very often reacting too late. So there's no forethought about the future, and Stuart's absolutely right. We should be now thinking, particularly about the jobs which are valuable to us and how we take care of those jobs and keep them in our society, and keep them staffed, if nothing else. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, I'm gonna do a couple of comments here, and then I'm gonna go to a question, because there were a couple of comments I was gonna use as a question, but I'm just gonna now read them as comments because there's a good one that's come in just now. So Paul said the museum, when we were talking about museums, to put in the statue of people like Colston, is the Museum of Complete Bastards sounds like a winner. And Neil Terry makes a less funny but a very, very poignant point here. They argue that it needs to be a democratic process to take them down. But why isn't there a democratic process before they put statues up? And I think it's an incredibly important point, that, isn't it? So, you've got to go through 20 years of democracy and loads of petitions and we'll still ignore you. But they didn't. They just stuck it up because he had money, he was rich enough. So his family were rich enough. So he managed to put let's stick one up at Jimmy Savile. It's that kind of argument, isn't it? But we've got a really good, nice to see some names that I don't recognise from the stream tonight, which is really good. So we've got Gustin Dunn replying to us saying, who has benefited from automation? It seems like people are working longer hours. So, Laura, who's benefiting from automation?
Business owners, because they have to pay less amounts of staff. So the few staff they do have to work longer hours. I've noticed recently in Asda as well, they've put all of those, they used to have like the self-serve things. Well, they've got the majority of them are all those things, with one person walking up and down just to make sure your red light doesn't flash off. And all the normal checkouts, they're only staffing up to 3 people, and that's it. So these 3 people are like overworked because, you know, people like me, I don't want to use those self-scan things because I'll be there for ages waiting for whoever to come and say, yes, I'm over 18, or I'll scan something wrong, or I'll put it in the bag wrong or something. So they've got queues and queues of people up the aisles, so they're overworked. And I really do, hand on heart, believe it is a money-making scheme. The business owners save money any way they can. And automation would do that. You know, it's a one-off cost. Once you've got your electricals, your equipment and everything, you just have to pay a little bit to sort of get it looked after and serviced. It's not, you don't have to worry about them being late. You don't have to worry about paying sick pay. You don't have to worry about maternity or paternity leave. It's just, it's a no-brainer for capitalists. For me, that's who I think are benefiting from it.
So, John, as an extension to this, why don't we have a 3-hour week with all this automation now? Sorry, not a 3-hour week, a 3-day week. 3-hour week would be nice, but why don't we have a 3-day week like was predicted in Keynesian economics? Predicted a 3-day week, didn't it? Is that right?
Well, when they started when the computers came in, I can remember people saying that, you know, we need to prepare for increased leisure. People came into schools advising children to go into leisure industries because that's where the future lay, because we were all going to have this extra leisure. And of course, it was just hijacked by neoliberalism, wasn't it? Laura's absolutely spot on. They just lied to us. And I think that one of the and it goes back to mental health as well. One of the worst things is that, and please forgive me, I realize I get into trouble for talking like this, but particularly men have historically defined themselves in relation to the job that they did. So you would say to a man, tell us about yourself, John. Oh, well, I'm a teacher. You know, that was the first thing they said. Mm-hmm. And so many people have had, and it may be true of women as well, Laura. I mean, but I'm just particularly aware of it being a man thing. And so many people have just had their jobs stolen from them. And so there's this huge mental health issue that, who am I now? I'm not a welder. Who am I now that I'm sort of, not an engineer? And automation has swept in, and it can do without us. And somebody sort of talked about useless people being, we're not interested in you if you're useless within the neoliberal system. So many people are really useless. And I'm ultimately, you have this kind of vision, don't you, of this Star Trek world where you just wander over to the replicator and all your needs are supplied. But the other side of that is that we need to give people a reason to live. Having our physical wants met is only a fraction of what we need to be balanced and happy human beings. And sort of automation just does not even begin to address that. And so who has benefited from automation? I think I agree with Laura. The billionaires, really.
Yeah,
I think one of the reasons that people are, obviously he's mentioned there as well, why are people working longer hours? I think with automation also came the gig economy and 0 hours contracts and things like that. So people have 2 or 3, sometimes 4 jobs just to earn one wage. And so they take and work wherever they can. And that is really bad for mental health as well, because you don't know where your next pay is coming from. You don't know where your next meal's coming from. You just take anything you can get at any time of day. The whole system, though, like just coming back on what John was saying there, the system's designed that way, I think, for a reason. You know, we're brought up to try our best and aim high. One day this could be you. If you just work hard enough, you too could be a millionaire. When that's all rubbish. If you're not born into it, you're not going to be a millionaire, really, unless you win the lottery, which Paul will tell you the odds on that. And I just think we're sold this myth for our entire life that you are only achieving something if you have a title or if you have a job that has a certain wage packet with it. We need to much more prepare our young people for life and how to be happy in life, and that happiness is you succeeding at something, because I think it is causing far too much damage. And John, you're absolutely right. I think that it causes men a lot more damage because men are, you know, traditionally the breadwinner, and you have to have your status in the house and everything. All this patriarchal structure that needs to be absolutely abolished. But we can kid ourselves as much as we want, but we're still in it. There's a reason why shows like Pop Stars and X Factor and all of that are so successful and so highly viewed. It's because we are, again, sold that myth. This could be you one day. Look, all you have to do is work hard and all your dreams will come true. You know, we talk about, what's her name, Molly May, or, you know, we all have the same 24 hours. Not quite. My 24 hours and Beyonce's 24 hours probably look different.
Absolutely spot on. Can I read something, Paul, from one of my history books? And it's direct. This is a letter in 1873 from a female spinner, and a letter to the newspaper, and it just sums up the issue of mechanization and improved technology and the effect upon working people. The spelling is unbelievable. It's just so wonderful, and there's no full stops, which I will try and take account, but I will run out of breath. But here we go. She writes, while reading in the paper today on the subject of shorter hours of labour, I was reminded of a circumstance that came under my own notice. I was minding a machine with 30 treads in it. I was then made to mind 2 or 30 treads each, and with improved machines in a couple of years, I was minding 2 machines with 200 treads each and double speed, so that in our improved condition, we went as if the devil was after us for 10 hours per day, and the females have often been carried out fainting, what with the heat and hard work. And all this is done in Christian England. And then we are told to be content in the station of life to which the Lord has placed us. But I say the Lord never did place us there, and we have no right to be content.
I like that.
Is that not wonderful and true?
Yeah, Stuart.
Clearly, the argument around automation isn't that it's we know it's coming. It's a thing. Technology moves on, and a wise old man said that we should really own these things if they're producing things. The means of production, one might say. So there's a moral argument that we're in now. Do we morally want to see people have jobs when we go to the shop? Do we want cashiers scanning things so that when pensioners who might see no one else for that week get the opportunity to have a conversation? Do we want to make sure that our postmen and women are still post people, that in 10, 15 years' time, they're not some robot drone just dropping stuff off in the garden? Because they are, in many ways, walking social workers as they knock on the doors, fixing life's problems. We have a real ethical conversation that we need to have around our workplaces. This is no longer just about do we want to accept a job or not anymore? Do we want to accept a job with an employer who will get rid of us? We need to start re-recognising our value. We need to aim ourselves as at work that is socially valuable. We need to start educating ourselves towards work that is socially valuable. No longer should we be, taking on apprenticeships in things that will be dead in 10 and 15 years' time. We need to create the people that we need for 10, 15, 30 years' time. And John touched on it, how we define ourselves as people about our job. Now, I define myself as a person who was a panel beater. That was a job I loved, and that was taken away from me, not by an employer, but by circumstances of genetics, misfortune, illness. I could no longer do that job anymore. My investment in time and education was down the drain. I was no longer valuable in that situation. I want to do it. I want to do that job. That job was great. I really enjoyed that job, but there's no place for me in it. So we have to start as workers looking at the places where there's a place for us in the future. We have to find a place for our future, and recognizing that we have to have some control over the ethics of automation is a big deal.
Absolutely brilliant, Stuart. And no discussion on this kind of thing would be complete without me mentioning the bullshitization of the workplace as well. Because Stuart, you were talking about socially valuable jobs, and there are all sorts of things. And what if we did have drones to deliver the post, but people did wander around each other's street and they say, tell you what, we can check on each other and let's do that kind of thing. And, they had, as part of their leisure time, they could do these things. That would be really good. But instead, what often happens is they'll invent a layer of middle management in order to protect the proper management from anyone actually realising how terrible they are. So the people below middle management are going, hey, these middle managers don't know what they're doing. And the middle managers are looking up to the boss going, oh, well, at least he's given me a job in middle management and I've got a little bit of loyalty towards them. And then they will create a layer of bullshit. And capitalism's extremely good at creating bullshit jobs. I'm going to mention a few comments. There've been some absolutely brilliant ones. Thanks to Tim Dredge, as always, really, really useful information. So thank you for that. Anthony Riley has been involved as well. Mia, thank you very much. Vonnie was able to really contribute on the Emma Watson stuff, saying about how she's held firm. She hasn't taken the post down. She's been really good. So once again, solidarity with Emma Watson. Hello to Colin White, and hello to anyone, Terry, anyone, and Neil, and anyone I haven't mentioned. It's been really nice to have you on tonight. You've been, as always, really, really good, really well informed, and a lovely bunch of people. And hopefully we've done you a nice job tonight. Laura, would you like to tell people what they can do to get involved with Socialist Think Tank?
Yeah, okay. Right, okay. Please do get involved with Socialist Think Tank. You can find us on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook. We do have a website as well, socialistthinktank.com. Head over to our website and become a member. It is absolutely free to become a member because we are socialists. We don't expect you to pay. However, if you do have a touch of the capitalist about you and you can afford a little bit, please do donate, just so that we can continue to make shows like this for you. And yeah, just get involved. We always believe that people making comments, you are not just an audience member, you are a participant in the show, and we absolutely love that. So yeah, keep it up. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be here on Saturday. I think. Will we be here on Saturday? I don't know. We'll definitely be here next Tuesday.
We might have something lined up. I'm working on something that I haven't talked to you about yet. So yeah, might surprise you. Quantum Skyline just mentioned, said don't ever automate Socialist Think Tank because he loves you talking rather than robot versions of yourselves. I'm actually a robot, so but the rest of them are real humans, which is really nice. Thank you again for press 3 to hear Paul struggles with the stream. That actually does work, but yeah. So thanks again to everyone. Look out for other things. Please do tell your friends to do things like subscribe to our YouTube channel and to get involved in other ways. It really does help. If you share our things, if you share our posts, if you like us, like things that we do on Twitter, that does contribute towards us growing as a channel. We do think we kind of have a nice bunch of connections thanks to Laura, who does all the organising, and we do try and bring you some really, really top quality guests, but no more top quality than you will get on this show with John and Stuart and Samantha. We will see you all again soon, and hopefully you will all stay well, stay safe out there, everyone, and get healthy as well. Make sure that you care about yourselves a little bit, because the socialists need to be really, really healthy, ready for the struggles ahead. Take care, everyone. I sounded a bit bonkers there, didn't I? See you there, everyone.
Keep the red flag flying there.